start recording. Is that right? Nope. All right, the recording started. Welcome all to Introduction to XCSoar, Basics to Advanced Settings. It's a longer presentation to get through everything in XCSoar. You can ask questions along the way, but I'm probably going to be deferring your question to later because a lot of things come up later in the presentation. Yeah, let's get started. This, by the way, this presentation is, I linked it at the bottom of the messages there, or at the top of the messages, so you
Yes,
can.
I'm looking at an analog clock that has been reset. Symptoms while you finish with the costs.
Someone's talking over here, but anyways, you can look at the presentation as well later or as we go along, whatever you like. But I'll be sharing the presentation on the screen here, and I'll also have XCSoar coming up here to do demonstrations as we go. XCSoar is a program that can help with navigation, final glide, and it can be a non-FAI certified logger, so you can use it for OLC, as well as many other things. It's open source now. It originally started as a commercial software. It's given to the open source community. It runs on a number of different platforms. The original was Windows Mobile, but that's been stopped now. But it runs on Linux, Windows. I know it used to run on iOS. I'm not sure if it still does. And Android is probably the most popular. Be used with touch import or a mouse, keyboard, or whatever. There's custom installs that have knobs and things that you can allocate to XCSoar. And it's still actively developed by a small team headed by a fellow named Matt Kellerman. I've been using XCSoar since 2006. It's changed a lot since then, but the same basic navigation is the same. But there's more and more features have come along. I started using it on Windows Mobile on a PDA, which those things were, you always had to attach a GPS to them because they wouldn't have internal GPSs, and they like to crash a lot. So using Android is much easier, or other built solutions, Linux ones, e-ink screen, e-readers also can run XCSoar. But it's come a long way, and now it's probably as feature packed as any other soaring application. Probably the best thing about XCSoar when you start is that it's free, and that's certainly why I started using it back in 2006. But now I'd say I think money's less of a problem for buying a program like this, but I've been using XCSoar so much, I like it because of all the features it has. It's full featured, and it has as much, if not more, features than any paid software around. So yeah, I mentioned different devices that you can run on. I've kind of put it into three categories here: phones, tablets, PDAs, which are usually phones and tablets, usually running Android. PDAs, I don't think anybody are actually using anymore, but those would be running Windows, Windows Mobile, e-readers, e-books, and then actual in-panel systems. There's OpenVario, and then the commercially available SteFly. OpenVario is something you actually build yourself that runs XCSoar, and you can make an in-panel solution. It certainly looks the neatest, but there's pluses and minuses to doing that. Of course, the OpenVario is the most expensive and going to cost to install it into your panel. There's going to be cost to that, and it's not as portable as having a phone, tablet, or an e-reader, which you can easily pull out of a glider and move to any other glider that you're flying. I'll go a bit deeper into the tablets. Are great devices to run XCSoar, but I find them a little bit large in general. Also, larger screens usually have worse sunlight readability. Sunlight readability is one of the biggest factors you want to consider when you're buying a device for XCSoar, because you're going to be flying it or you're going to be using it in the cockpit with the sun shining down on it most of the time. So tablets generally have lesser backlights. They're larger screens, which is great, but they take up more room in the cockpit as well, and most cockpits are relatively small. So if you really want a big screen, I think tablets are okay, but I'd say there are some cons to them. You might not be able to read them as well, and they take up a lot more space. Phones are great because almost everyone has a smartphone these days, and if you have an Android phone, it should be able to run XCSoar. XCSoar is pretty low resources for a phone, so it'll run on a very old phone as well. The phones generally have a better sunlight readability than a tablet, although it really depends on the phone. Generally, the newest, highest end phones have the best screens, the brightest screens. So the newest and most high end phones usually have the best screens. If you're looking to buy a device, really, how much processing power it has little to do with how well it'll run XCSoar. It doesn't take much, but the screen is probably the biggest thing that you want to be considering when you're shopping for one of these. Yeah, pretty much all phones will have a GPS, an internal GPS in them, although you do want to check. There are some that don't, but most do, at least recent ones. Tablets, it's a little bit more of a mixed bag. You might not have an internal GPS. Now, that's not the end of the world. You can always connect an external GPS, but having a backup in your phone is nice. E-readers, that's the biggest attraction for the e-readers is their sunlight readability. The sun will hit the screen, and it's using the sun's light to view the screen instead of trying to overpower the sun with a light in the back of the screen. So e-readers have great sunlight readability. It's always going to be better in a phone just because you can't beat the sun. The original, I guess there's a few models that can work with XCSoar. I had one of these Kobo Touches. It died on me, so it's not going anymore. But I think they're about 10 years old or so, the original ones. There are some newer Kobos that can run XCSoar. Some of the negatives of an e-reader screen, obviously color is the most obvious one, although I'll mention this later, but there are some color e-ink screens available these days. Where was I? Yeah, the e-reader screens usually have some ghosting, so when they refresh the page, a quick refresh, some of the ink might stay on the screen. There's a kind of hard refresh and a quick refresh. You can hard reset some of these phones manually, e-readers manually, so the ghosting will go away a little bit. But I'd say the older the e-reader, the worse the ghosting can be on the screen. Newer e-readers have gotten better and better with that. So if you're buying a recent e-reader or e-ink screen, ghosting is less and less of a problem. I am flying with yeah, here it is. This is my panel with XCSoar running. It's an e-ink phone. There's only or I think this is the only actual phone like this, or maybe there's 2 or 3 others around. This is called a Hisense A5. The newer models are A7 and A9. I really like this solution. It's kind of a mix of the phone and the e-ink screens. The sunlight readability is excellent. It does actually have a backlight. If for some reason, it got dark, it will light up the back of the screen and you can still read. It's got an internal GPS. It runs Android, and it's pretty easy to install XCSoar and connect it to devices. The actual e-readers, e-books, they don't run Android. They're running a form of Linux, and it's a bit more of a hassle to install. It's not extremely hard, but it's not as easy as something like this. I see there's a bunch of things coming in the chat. I don't know if they're questions, but take a look here. Yeah, some people are mentioning Top Hat. Top Hat is a derivative of XCSoar. It's not developed anymore, and that would be my biggest concern with it. I think it had in some ways, an easier interface, but when I looked at Top Hat, and I liked some parts of it, but especially the settings menu they were trying to layer things on top of XCSoar, and I found it actually made it a little bit more complicated, but it does run very similar to XCSoar, and if you're interested in Top Hat, a lot of the topics here will work with Top Hat. But yeah, so it hasn't been updated for a number of years now, and I believe they've stopped development on it. So if you want something that's more recent and kept up with updates, I would stick with XCSoar. There you go. A few different solutions for mounting. These are the 3 main ones that I usually see. A ball mount run on the panel. I know at SOSA, the gliders at least used to have ball mounts. I think they still do. Some of the cross-country gliders. At QNIM, we have ball mounts on a couple of our single-seat cross-country gliders. Yeah, ball mounts are solid. Suction cups are the other option if you're bringing your device to different airplanes. Suction mounts are great because they're work anywhere. You can suction mount it to the canopy, but they have a higher probability of falling off. When I was using suction mounts flying in wave out of Cowley, when I was pushing to get my diamond distance stuff or diamond altitude, I found that the cold and the pressure changes had to let the suction cup fall off. Even I had a good quality RAM suction cup, but they were falling off. But the rest of the time flying, below 12,000 feet, suction cups worked fine for me. I never had a problem with them falling off. Now, if have your own glider and you're wanting to set up a on-panel mount, that's an option. It's obviously going to cost a bit more money. Takes up more space on your panel. I guess now most people are going to be using XCSoar with touch, so it makes it a little bit harder to touch the screen as well when you mount on the panel. So I personally like a ball mount on the panel for myself, but everyone's got different needs, so you can take those into consideration. The biggest name with mounts is RAM mounts. These are kind of the 3 main things the main products that I was going to go at. They have many more, and they might even have a specific mount for your phone or tablet or whatever you have. But one of the more common ones is the X grip. It's good universal grip. I use an X grip at work, holding our tablets in the airplane. The iPhone or iPads. I don't think I've ever had it actually fall out of the X grips with an iPad in there, which is much heavier than a phone. So I think they're pretty secure, but I feel more comfortable with the quick grip RAM mount, especially going into rotor or something like that, where you're really getting pushed around. The quick grip, I think there's almost no chance that your phone's going to fall out of it. It's actually slightly cheaper than the X grip. And yeah, I think it works well. The RAM suction cup mounts are also really high quality, good mounts. There's all sorts of other brands you can look at on Amazon or whatever. But if you do want a good solution, I do recommend the RAM mount. They're the highest quality, and they are more expensive than some of the cheap mounts, but I think you'll get better quality out of these. All right, so now we're going to start on the practical part of this. If you have an XCSoar device, Android device, bring it out. I guess if you have any kind of XCSoar, bring it out. We're going to start with how to install XCSoar from Android. But yeah, if you can follow along for basically the rest of this presentation with your device and check out all the different settings and how to use XCSoar. I'm going to pause here. I think there's a couple questions came in. Yeah, I guess we have a few different ways. Like someone mentioned they have a wrist mount in their a wrist mount for their PDA. For I guess the knee board works okay as well for running XCSoar, but there's all sorts of different solutions. So yeah, if you have not installed XCSoar yet and you have an Android phone, you can pull out your phone. Most Android phones will have the App Store, Play Store, sorry, installed. You're gonna open up the Play Store, type in XCSoar under search, and you'll see there's a blue XCSoar. There are a few different styles of XCSoar. There's testing, and this is actually an older. This is from my presentation a few years ago. I think there's even more XCSoars now and different things like that. But stick with the blue XCSoar unless you have a real reason to change to the other ones. Yeah, just tap install. Accept all the warnings. It's going to ask if it can access files on your phone. You need it to do that to access all the map files and waypoint files, airspace files, etc. Now this used to be an easier thing with XCSoar, but on an Android device, adding files to your phone or device, they've changed uh, the folder where XCSoar is kept. It's an Android system change, and the XCSoar developers I don't think like it, but they couldn't do anything. It's an Android system thing. It used to the XCSoar data file where you'd put your files in used to be on the root drive. Now you have to go into at the bottom of this presentation here, storage emulated to 0 Android data org.xcsoar to find the XCSoar data folder. If you're connecting your device to a computer, you can just use the computer's file manager to navigate to that. But or actually, it might just be under Android data. I don't know if you need the storage emulated 0 if you're connecting your device to computer, but yeah, it made it a little bit harder with this new address. On your phone, it's even more difficult. It used to be you could use any file manager to, like, usually your phone came with some sort of a file manager, but now you need a specific file manager that can access hidden files. If you look up on the Play Store, hidden file manager or hidden folder manager, you'll find a bunch of different things. Some of them might be paid. There are free ones. They might have ads or something like that, but you can find solutions to move files around when you're downloading or moving files on your Android device. Just keep a note, if you go to a website on your phone, let's say that you're downloading the airspace from the Proving Grounds website and you click on the airspace file. When you click on it, it'll come up, do you want to download? And then it will download to your downloads folder. You can't choose where it goes. Once it goes to your downloads folder, you'll have to open the file manager that can access hidden files, copy from your downloads folder or move from your downloads folder that file to your XCSoar data file folder. Yeah, and I'd say you need to access the XCSoar data folder, you need to have hidden files activated in your browser. XCSoar also has an internal file manager, and I'm going to be going on that one mostly today. You do need to be connected to the internet to access this. It has maps, waypoints, airspace, and I've actually gotten Proving Grounds tasks uploaded to the internal file manager of XCSoar. So it makes setting up a brand new install of XCSoar much easier. And we're going to be doing that in a moment. So the XCSoar accepts all sorts of different waypoint files, airspace files. It's the Tim Newport's piece file and OpenAir, so .sua, .txt. Sometimes the Tim Newport piece comes as a txt, and you have to change the suffix to sua, .sua. And then, yeah, maps are they available from the XCSoar website. They're also available from the XCSoar internal file manager, which I find is the easiest way. And yeah, we'll get to that later. All right, so we're going to start with the initial setup of XCSoar, assuming that you have not, you've just installed XCSoar and haven't done anything with it yet. So for new users, if you have your device, bring it out and follow along with this. We're going to open up XCSoar. This is the opening screen. For today, we're going to use Sim. Regularly, if you're actually flying, you want to use the fly button there, but press the Sim on the right side. I'm going to bring up XCSoar here. Oops. I'm hoping you guys can all see my XCSoar. Oh. So yeah, opening a menu. There's two ways to open a menu. Open the menu on XCSoar. One is by double clicking on the screen, and that screen should come up. Another way is you can make a check mark and the menu will come up. I'll show you later. Sometimes clicking on the screen, you'll get a different dialog opening. The check mark way of opening up the menu is can be better because you'll less likely open up another dialog when you tap on the screen. Some older devices will have a dedicated menu button, which is useful. Sometimes you can set that up for buttons on the side of your volume buttons or something like that. But yeah, we're gonna get to setting up maps. So you're gonna open up the menu, tap on the system tile, and we'll get into the config menu. So here we go, config, and then system. We have site files come up here. I'm gonna tap on the site files, and we're gonna start with getting a map for XCSoar. I've checked on expert here. I think for this presentation, best that you check on expert as well. It gives a few more options, as you saw when I clicked on that. I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger so everyone can see. gonna tap on map database. I don't have any files in my XCSoar at the moment, but I have an internet connection, so I'm gonna tap on download, and it gives me a huge list of different map files I can download. I'm gonna scroll down, find Canada. Since we're a SOSA group today, I'm gonna put the Southwest Ontario. High res I'm gonna pick. I think there's no reason not to do high res, so just tap on that. It's gonna download, and now it's loaded into XCSoar. If you had a file on your XCSoar, when you clicked on here, you'd be able to find it in this list, and you can just select it there. Waypoints, I'm just going to use a generic waypoint from, oh, it is here. Actually, yeah, okay. Right at the top, you'll see there's a global waypoint proving grounds XCSoar. I tap on that, it'll download it quickly, and then we're going to more waypoints. We're going to download. Find Canada, CA. There's National Open AIP. We'll pick that one. It's going to give us a whole bunch of airports and maybe a few other waypoints that you can include in there. So you tap on that, hit download. And that's going to be under more waypoints. Airspace we're going to set up. Download again. And Canada. Oh yeah, sorry. This one's the border. If that's useful to you. I think in Ontario it's a little bit less useful because you're going to run over a lake before you hit the border, but let's go for the national XCSoar one. XCSoar, OpenAIP are different sources that the data is coming from. I actually supply the Canadian national airspace to XCSoar, and I think OpenAIP actually takes the same airspace that I supply. So either should be the same, but this is the one that I've uploaded the most recently, so I recommend using the XCSoar one. Download that. Let's say if you want to put the border in there, and I'll do that just as an example. You can put the border in under more airspaces. You can put 2 different airspace files in there, and it'll show both on the screen. I'm going to show you this now, although we'll talk about this a little bit later. If you connect XCSoar to a FLARM device, you can download a FLARMnet file, which will give you the IDs of every FLARM. So it'll give you the contact letters or the registration of everybody who's registered their FLARM on FLARMnet. If you want to quickly download that database, click in here, download. There's different options here. I'm actually not sure what United is. I'm assuming that's FLARMnet and OGN together. I'll download that one and see what it is. But yes, just will put the FLARM file in there, and then when FLARM objects come up on your map screen, it'll have the contest number or registration on there as well. So that's our site files are set up. Go back to our presentation here. We've already done all that. The other thing I want to do is change the units. As you see, when I exited the config there, you can see the map come up, and I've put I think it's in the middle of the map here. Well, next thing I want to do is configure the units. So we're going to go back to config, system, setup, and units. In Canada, most of us use imperial units for things like altitude and lift, talking about knots, and then we use for task for distance and task speeds usually kilometers an hour. Although we use airspeed for knots, which is an odd setup, but the Australians do the same thing. So if you want a quick preset, you can just go to the Australians. Wing loading, you might want to use something different for. Pressure, we usually use inches of mercury, so you might want to change pressure to inches of mercury when you're setting up XCSoar later. That could be a useful thing to do, but I think everything else is pretty similar. Now I'm going to close this, and yeah, we can see our altitudes in feet now. So yeah, you should have a map in front of you now, with some terrain, airports, waypoints, and airspace. Yeah, the other little thing, XCSoar has a number of gestures that you can use to navigate around. The one I've already shown you is check mark to open the main menu. Zooming in and zooming out is just down is zoom out, and then up is zoom in. To go to the different pages that XCSoar has, you can use left or right to change the pages. At the moment, there's only 2 pages that I have set up with XCSoar, a full screen map and then one with the info boxes. There's a bunch more gestures. Go back here. I don't really use them because I use the first 5 here, but making a P to do pan mode, I think would be very difficult to do when you're actually flying the glider. And the other ones, I don't.
Chris,
We
we've
don't
lost
hear you.
audio. Oh, we've lost audio.
You guys have me now?
Yep,
Yes.
perfectly.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, my headset just died. Um, Anyways, yeah, these other gestures I find are a bit uh yeah, a bit difficult to use actually in flight, but they're there if you do want to use them. So yeah, pretty much all these things you can access through the menu. So we're gonna start general use of XCSoar. Again, follow along on your device. So the one thing that you might notice if you just tap on the screen anywhere, I'll show an example here. I'm going to tap in the area of this airport, Burlington. A whole bunch of options are going to come up here. This is showing all of the map elements that you just clicked on, and there's a lot because there's a lot of airspace in this area. It's the Toronto TCA. There's also the transponder mandatory area, airways and such. And then there's the Burlington Executive Airport. If you want to select the Burlington Executive Airport to go to, you can click on that, but we'll get to that later. Yeah, we already talked about opening up the menu. There's nav display, config, and info at the bottom, and we're going to get into all those parts. Now, we talked a little about zooming before with gestures. The other option, if you want to zoom in, is to open the menu, go to display, and you have a zoom here. There's also an auto zoom. I usually don't use that. I like to prefer to zoom my own as I'm flying along, but you might find that useful. There's also panning. So there's different ways to open up panning. You can try doing this P gesture, which gets you to the panning thing here, or you can open up the menu, go to display, and pan mode's at the bottom, and then you can pan around looking at the area. I can actually zoom with my roller on my mouse, but if you want to zoom in and out, you also have the buttons down here, and that gives you a little target if you want to know what. I'll put the target, that's a reads field, but if you don't know what that is, you can hit what's here, and it'll come up with the same type of dialogue as if you tap on it. Yeah, we talked already about map pages. You can swipe left or right to get a full screen, and then later on we'll show you how to set up your own custom map pages. Task setting. So we're gonna set up a task. This is gonna be a random task here for for SOSA. So I'm gonna open up the menu, tap on Nav, Task Manager. And it's an open task. There's nothing set up in the tasks. There's just a little thing here we can tap on to start adding a turn point. I'm going to type in, I think 58 is Rockton, so 050. Oh, that didn't work. No, it says 58. Rockton comes up. That's going to be my first turn point. It's going to be start. And then I'll just add, put 11 for Cambridge. It's a turn point, and I'll put Rockton again. You might get a list by default coming up here if you have a smaller list of waypoints, but if you have a really large list, you have to type in the start of the name there. The last thing I do is, so I've added these turn points. I just want it to be an out return for Cambridge. It's a simple one right now. I'm going to hit make finish, and we have made a task here. I'm just going to follow along with the presentation here. So we've entered our tasks. We can edit the turn point types. So just tap on, let's say Rockton. Right now it's a FAI sector. You can change it to a start line, or you can leave it as a sector, doesn't matter. So you can set up your task types there, or your turn point types. You can also save the tasks. So if you say we like this task, we can go to manage here and save it, name it as, let's say SOSA 1 or SOSA out and return, I'm going to call it AONR. There we go. Now that's saved. If I want to get back to that task anytime later, I go to the manage, browse, and SOSA out and return task is there. The other thing we can do is we downloaded the Proving Grounds global file. We can access all the Proving Grounds tasks through the file manager. So I'm going to do this one more time. We're going to hit manage and then browse. If your screen is just showing just a default task or just an empty screen, hit more in the bottom right. That'll bring up a huge list of all the Proving Grounds tasks in the world at the moment, although it's slightly out of date, but SOSAs are definitely up to date. So I'm just going to scroll down and find the SOSA racetrack will do. With the phones now, with the with Windows, I can make this box bigger and I can read the names better. With a phone screen, you might not be able to read this as well. I don't really have a solution of how to fix that other than tap. You can usually see the edge of SOSA and trial and error, try to find the racetrack one. But yeah, we'll load that in. So now our task is loaded in as the SOSA racetrack. So yeah, let's talk now a little bit about setting up AAT tasks. The SOSA racetrack basically is an AAT. For people who don't know what an AAT is, assigned area task, there's kind of two main types of tasks when you get when you're contest flying. A racing task, which is you have start and finish, and you go to each turn point, and there's either a small sector or a cylinder that you have to hit, and then go to the next one. And you don't get any points for going any further into the cylinder or further into the sector or anything like that. An AAT is a task that usually or it will always have a time limit to it, and it'll have larger turn point cylinders, and you can go as far into the turn point cylinder as you'd like, and you can go around the task, and you have to make it back above the minimum time. If you come in below the minimum time, if you just minimize the sectors and come in straight away, and you come in below minimum time, your time is for the task is going to be the minimum time of the AAT. So if it was a 3-hour task, you come in at 2 hours, your time is going to be, or your speed is going to be scored based on 3 hours, not the 2 hours that you actually flew. So, anyways, the AT is going to have these large cylinders that you can fly further into. The scoring program figures out how your maximum distance flying into each cylinder, and then it calculates your speed based on that. So to set up a AAT, you're going to tap on rules. There's racing AAT. Modified area task is a US type of task, and then the FAI badge records. FAI badge records is good. I don't think it actually gives you the option of changing the term point types. It uses the FAI style term point types. And it also gives a 1,000 meter start and finish difference between your start and finish. So when you cross the finish line, it'll calculate your final glide for the finish to be at least 1,000 meters below, or so I guess at most 1,000 meters below your start height. So it can be somewhat useful for that, but I prefer to just use a racing task and set the things up manually, because then you know exactly what it's calculating. The FAI one can get kind of confusing. Anyways, we'll set up AATs there. You're always going to need to set up an AAT time. We have the SOSA racetrack set up at the moment, so it's a relatively small task. I'm going to put an hour in there just for demonstration purposes. Arm start manually. I think I get into that a little bit later, but you can either have a little button that pops up that says, I want to start now, or I'm going to hit the button, which means I'm going to cross the start line. If you don't use that, if you're let's say you're thermaling right on the start line of a task, XCSoar will think that you every time that you leave that you started the task again. If that's annoying to you, you can have the arm start manually on. There's times that I found XCSoar won't get your start properly if you don't make sure that the start is armed, or that you're on the start cylinder. So do make sure that you when you're starting a task like that, that your start is properly armed, ready to go. Score and start exit. I'm not sure why that's even an option, but it is. I leave that one on. You can set up max heights and finish heights here as well. Make sure that you set up MSL and AGL appropriately. Depending if you're flying a contest, that you to give you an MSL height for a finish height, so make sure that you set that up properly. The PV stuff is probably don't have to worry about. But anyways, we have that set up for 1 hour. And actually, the one thing I'm going to do right here is I'm going to get the airplane sitting at SOSA. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to open the menu, hit display, pan mode, and I'm going to tap on Rockton. I'm going to go over to Rockton 58. And then it gives me this dialog box on Rockton 58. I'm going to go over here and set as my new home. I think what I really wanted to do right now is put me on Rockton, but it also will. There's info boxes and different settings in XCSoar that allow you to get a final glide to home. So now the home is set as Rockton. That's how you do that. Yeah, so when you're flying an AAT, let's say you have the choice of how far you go into each cylinder. If you want to change where you're going into each cylinder, what you can do is tap on the area. I'm going to use the Cambridge 11 one here. And it'll give you, there's two different options, because I tapped right on the term point. The actual term point is 11 Cambridge, and that'll give you different options here. But if you want to change the area for the task, we wanted to do the A1, 11 Cambridge. I'm going to tap on that. And there's this little target here. If I want to move that target, XCSoar is going to navigate us to this spot in that area. If I want to move that, I can just drag it along, or I can just tap somewhere in the area and the target will move. XCSoar also can optimize it for you by tap on optimize here. See, it's minimizing it right now, and I think it's because the McCready is very low, so it assumes that we're going to fly very slowly through it. But yeah, minimize it here. I guess I'm going to unoptimize with that. The other things you can do is, let's say you wanted to make sure that you maximize that turn point as much as you can. You can go to the percentage box here for distance, hit 100%, and it'll give you the maximum distance. You can also change radials based up here, but I find the distance one, I do use that occasionally when flying these tasks. If I want to go to the next area, the arrows at the top will take me to the next areas. There's the next one, and then Peter's Corners, but I go back to Cambridge. I'm going to optimize them. So all of them are optimized right now. So the optimization works based on your McCready setting. I'm going to move a little bit ahead in here, but we can edit our McCready setting with its info box down at the bottom. And it's going to tap on McCready and just watch the task as I increase the McCready. XCSoar is calculating that based on the McCready setting, it gets a speed based on the glider that you have set up and everything like that. So an estimated speed that you'll be flying for the task, and it will move these targets based on what the McCready setting is. And you can see now it's pretty much at the nominal distance, and as you increase the McCready, the points get bigger and bigger. You can also, I say, lock one if you. Now, when you actually turn the turn point, when you're flying the task and you've turned it, it will lock the target to your max distance in that cylinder. And it will, say, sometimes there's some ambiguous points where, it depends where you go to the next turn point. It'll calculate that for you. But if you haven't hit the turn point yet, so we can click on the area again, and we can lock this one so basically as soon as I move it, it turns off the optimized. So I'm going to lock it down. I think I want to avoid going over top Cambridge because there's overcast there or something like that. So I've moved that there. Then you can adjust your McCready, and you see it's locked on the Cambridge one because the optimized box is unchecked, and the other two will move based on that. So it can be a good way to kind of figure out how far you want to go into an AAT task by moving the McCready and seeing how that adjusts. I see there's lots of questions if in the task here. Okay, it's 2-finger pinch. Okay, yeah. Well, let's see. Someone mentioned that if you rotate your screen, I guess we'll go back to Task Manager. If you're in the Task Manager looking for a task and you can't read it, you can rotate your screen, and that can help being able to read these tasks. Panda task. I guess I think I showed that already, but I'll do that one more time. We'll display pan mode, and we can check that all our points are in correctly. We can see where the targets are. Exit pan mode, you can hit cancel. So there's a go-to function if you're flying a task and let's say you're getting low. We're coming along Reed's Field and we're saying, oh, I don't know if I'm going to make it back to Rockton. I want to go direct to Reed's Field. So, oh, sorry, someone's hands up. You want to ask a question? David?
Yeah, Chris, it's Dave Gossam. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, very quickly. That final glide bar, is that set to like the optimum finish, like the finished cylinder height, the minimum finished cylinder height, or to the center of the airport? I'm always sort of confused whether it's the safety height for the glider or if it's the competition best finish.
It will be the edge of the cylinder in this case. It depends how you have it set up, but in this case with this task, there is a let's go into the task here. I'm going to cover that a little bit later as well, but I think it's good to talk about
Yeah.
it now. That's in the way. There we go. Rules. Oh yes, so that's the one thing that the what's it called? The Proving Grounds cup files, they don't have finish heights. So if you are putting a Proving Grounds task into XCSoar, you do have to set the finish height. I can't remember what exactly the finish height is at Rockton, but I'm guessing it's 1,000 feet, so 1825. I think it's 1825. Until I haven't been there for a bit. So anyways, we you can set it there. So that's going to be your finish height. That's about 1,000 feet above ground. So that'll give you 1,000 feet at the edge of the cylinder, which is 2 kilometer cylinder in this case, which should be a safe amount to get yourself back to Rockton. The one situation where that changes, where can be different. Now it's always going to be the edge of the cylinder if you have a cylinder for a finish. But the altitude that you set up, if you have a finish altitude of 500 feet set up for this cylinder, but your safety factor is set for 1,000 feet, it will bring you back at 1,000 feet. And I guess one of the things I thought would happen that screwed me up on one of the flights one of the early flights with XCSoar that I flew was I had a 1,000-foot safety height set in the computer, and then I had it was basically 1,000 feet above the airport that was calculated for the finish. I assumed that it would give me 1,000 feet on top of the 1,000 feet finish height. But it actually gives you the highest of those two in MSL. So it'll give you 1,000 AGL or whatever the height's set to. Or it'll give you your safety altitude, which is, let's say, 1,000 AGL or the height. So it won't give you 2,000 feet above ground at the finish height, the finish line. It'll give you the highest of those two boxes, or those two numbers. So yeah, if you have 500 feet set as a finish and your 1,000 foot set as a safety, then it'll bring you navigate you back at 1,000 feet. Now, if you have 1,000 feet set as a safety and the airport or the finish is set as 1,000 feet, so they're both the same. If your final glide bar is 0, that'll bring you back with 0 height. If you want to have a bit of a buffer zone with your final glide coming to finish the task, it's it's better to have a plus on there because it will be 0 in that case. So you do have to be pretty conscious about that. It's not giving you an extra 1,000 feet. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks for the diversion. It was excellent. Thanks.
All right, yeah, so we'll get to the go-to. We're going to go to Reed's Field. We just want to, we're getting low around Reed's Field and we might have to land there. So we want to make sure that we have a final glide there. So you just tap on Reed's Field. So a bunch of things come up here. The area of Reed's Field, if you click on that, it's going to give you the target that we were looking at previously. But if we want to actually go to the airport, we have to click on one of these airports. Now there's 2 Reed's Fields in this. One of them is probably from the Proving Grounds file, and one of them is probably from the All of Canada file that we downloaded. So what doesn't really matter which one you go to. It should give you a final glide to either of them, but that's why there's 2 of them. I'm going to tap on that. I'm actually not sure why that's not coming up with go to right here, but I tap on it again. Then we can click go to on the bottom of this screen. There's also a whole bunch of options. You can insert it into a task, append it to a task, yada, yada, yada. But it gives you that go to button. So I'm going to click go to. We have a final glide to Reed's Field now. It's saying we're on the ground at Rockton right now. So it's saying we need 3,000 feet to get there, but it's giving us both navigation and a final glide to Reed's Field. Yeah, so let's say that you know, we got low, but we wanted to continue on the task. But you already have Reed's Field in there, and you want to get rid of that and go back to the task. You can open the menu, hit nav, and then go to the second screen of nav, and that'll give you task resume button. You click that, and the task is back there. And it will be, you know, if you're past Cambridge, it'll already have that you're past Cambridge and that you're navigating to Reed's Field. So it's kind of a useful little box if you for navigating a task and you're getting low. The other thing, if you don't know the area that well, or you don't know what to tap on, you can go to the alternates box. So I'm gonna open the menu, nav, there's alternates, and it'll give you the closest airports that are to you. It also gives you distance right under there. It's kind of hard to read, but it does give you distance. You know, Reed's Field's 14 kilometers, Waterloo's 22, Bradford is 25. So you can click on one of those. Let's do Brantford this time, and go to, and it'll give you go to that. And I want to get rid of that again, so I'll go task resume again. Reza, your hand's up. Go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. The question is where when you showed the alternates, there were arrival height beside the description under their name. Does the safety altitude considered there or not? The arrival
Yes, it would be.
altitude,
If you look at Rockton, it's minus 1,000 because basically I have a 1,000-foot safety height on there, so it is set up there. Now I haven't set up, you know, pole or anything on this thing yet, so that would be the most accurate numbers to be going on right now because I haven't set it up properly. But when you are set up properly with the polar and you have your safety altitude set up, then those things would be correct. Yeah.
So
But yeah,
so
you can
basically it means when we get there, we have, let's say we go to Reedsville, right? We will be there at 2,522 feet and not 3,522.
This is saying that you're going to be 2,500 under glide. So no, it would be basically you'd be 1,500 feet with no safety. So this does include the safety. See that we're at Rockton at zero, you know, on the ground at Rockton, and it's saying it's minus 1,000 feet. Actually, maybe let me so we're gonna talk about doing this later, but I'll do this quickly here. I'm gonna for the simulator, I'm gonna increase the altitude, and you can see our glide amoebas coming up here. I'm gonna make it so it just hits Reeds. Well, actually, yeah, this is actually a good example. The glide amoeba doesn't have the 1,000-foot safety in it. It tells you exactly how far you're going to glide. So it's showing that I can make Reed's Field, but not with the safety height. And increase a bit more here. There we go. Now it's showing up with Reed's Field as being 100 feet to go. So what I'm going to do is go into the nav and alternates. So now it's showing that we're well over Rockton, but it's showing the Reed's Field. So this is including the 1,000-foot safety. So if we fly there at the altitude that the computer has in for us right now, we'd actually show up there at about 1,300 feet above ground, not 278 feet above ground, because this includes the safety altitude.
And the green rings around the symbol of the airport, it means it is in a glide range.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, thank
And
you.
it also gives you that little box. And I'll get into the options of that later on, but I think that's actually coming up next. And yeah, that's a good question. Thanks. Yeah, I guess this is talking about how we can change our info boxes and for the simulator, how you can change the altitude. So you just saw me do it. So if I should have altitude set up on there, if you just tap on the altitude box, you can increase your altitude with the plus and minus boxes here. And then if you want to change what the info box is actually displaying, you can hit setup and switch info box, and it gives you this big list of different things you can set up in the info box. It's quite a long list of different things. And I'm going to get deeper into that later on in the settings part of the presentation. So let's make sure I didn't miss anything. Yeah, talked about changing in the info boxes, simulator mode. Yeah, I guess I'll get into. You can also, for simulator mode, you can also make the airplane move. And it can be useful as you're learning how to use everything. So I'm going to click on the airplane and then drag it towards Cambridge. And now it's starting to go on task here. You can see the ground speeds increasing. Now I think I can, oops, because I can't increase that. Oh yeah, I can, okay. So I'll put up to 130 knots so you'll see it move a little bit quicker. Phil Stang, you have a question, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I'll try to be quick. I've been trying to follow along. I got XCSoar for the PC downloaded, and I used the Canada map, but it's weird. It's just putting me, I don't know, in the middle of Timbuktu. I pan around. I don't know how to. And I said I used Ontario, but I'm nowhere near Ontario, so I don't get it.
Are you make sure that you're in sim mode, and then
Yes, I try.
I'll show us here. So, or I guess you want to select the Rockton airport somehow, if you want to follow along with this.
Well, that's what I was trying to do, but there's no way to do it because I'm somewheres, I think.
Yeah, let me
middle
show you.
of-
I'll show you how. So tap on Rockton.
But
in
how,
sim
how do
mode.
how do I get
Yeah,
there?
let's listen.
Okay.
We're gonna tap on Rockton, and then we go to this point here and set as new home. When you set as new home, that should bring you to Rockton. If it doesn't do that, try closing XCSoar and opening again, and that should bring you to Rockton when you open up sim mode.
Yeah, I'm in sim mode, and I used southeastern Ontario or whatever, but it's on the map. It's putting me somewheres in the middle of northern Quebec.
Did you? Okay, well, you want southwestern Ontario. That might be the problem then. If you had used southeastern Ontario, it shouldn't have Quebec in there.
Yeah, and it's like it's the only thing that it's showing is some weird little part of the map, and I try to zoom around, pan around, and the only part of it is rendering.
Quebec's in there. Yeah, I think you're using the wrong.
Well, it says I'm near Bagotville. It's the only thing I can click on is Bagotville.
that you have southwest Ontario, not southeast Ontario.
Okay, I'll try that. Okay, thanks.
I turn my glider around. Actually, I'm gonna drop the ground speed to 0 now. Anyways, you can actually go around a task and test out how everything works. Obviously, yeah, the one thing, or did it start me? Yeah, it didn't actually start me properly. So I'm gonna hit arm, and now it's should navigate me to Cambridge. Say if I want to navigate to the next turn point, at the moment I have arm start. I didn't actually arm the start before we left the start cylinder, so it didn't start me when I crossed the cylinder. Now, if you're flying along and that happens to you, you can go into nav and hit, oops, there we go, nav, hit next turn point, and now it's navigating us to Cambridge. Then when you enter that area, basically it'll keep navigating you to that target in Cambridge there. If when you're ready to move on to the next turn point, you go into nav here and hit arm turn, and she'll take you to the next turn point. I'll do that now. Now it won't actually, because I haven't actually hit Cambridge yet, it hasn't moved it to the next turn point, but as soon as I hit Cambridge, we'll do that really quick here. Because it's armed, it should send me to the next turn point. And so we have Cambridge at the top left here. There we go. Now it's changed me over to Reedsfield. Let's put the ground speed back down to 0 to stop us. I mentioned the glide reach a little bit earlier there. I'll show you to you again. this altitude, you can see this, it's kind of a tough to see, but there's a line here, it's black and white. You can also, there's options to make it a shade and stuff like that, but it's this line, that's basically how far you glide with no safety. It can be useful in mountain flying, it can be useful to give you an idea of how far, can you make the next bridge? Like you might be navigating to an airport or a turn point or something like that with a big ridge in front of you, and it might make more sense to go around that or something like that. So airports, I think Reza asked about that. If you're high enough to make the airport, it'll make a green circle around there, and it'll also give you a label which says how much above glide you are. Move that out of the way. If you're not in glide, it'll give you no circle around it, and it won't give you the label. Now this includes your safety height, whatever you have set for your safety height. Let's make sure that that's understood. And yeah, the example here, you'll make, if Drumheller is saying you're 1,400 feet above glide, that means that you're gonna get to Drumheller at 1,400 feet above your safety height, so you'd be 2,400 AGL. Assuming your safety height is set for 1,000 feet, make sure that you know what your safety height is set to. Final glide bar, got a little bit mentioned. We can see it in this example. It's showing that we're below final glide. If I crank the altitude up really high, probably see that we'll start getting into the positives. Now you see on this example, there's a green half bar and the big orange bar. The half bar is McCready 0 final glide, and the orange bar is your McCready's, or sorry, your final glide based on your McCready setting, your current McCready setting, which is 2.4 in this example. So that's why there's a difference. If you set, well, actually here, I'll show you. If I set 0 McCready, they should be the same. But as I put the McCready up, it shows me being lower. And yeah, I'll show both of these above final glide. It's taking a bit of height, but so now we're just above or 5 feet above final glide. That's with the safety margin. So it's going to take, or actually, in this case, with our, as I explained earlier, it's going to bring us right to the finish at 1,000 feet because our finish height and our safety height are the same. That's kind of, I find that confusing anyways, but that's how it works. Greedy setting, I already went over that.
Chris, sorry, this is Reza again. I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
On the slide, basically, which is on now, there is a ring around the glider, which shows the range of the glide, and also in a final glide bar, which you showed in a previous slide. Would the tailwind, headwind consider for the calculation of those ranges or not?
XCSoar does take that into account, yes. That's if you're getting proper wind data, of course. XCSoar gets its wind data if you're just using a phone not connected to an instrument or something like that, not connected to pneumatics. It calculates the wind based on your drift in a thermal. It gives you a pretty good idea what the wind is that way, but it's not 100% accurate. If you're hooked up to your Vario or pneumatic system with XCSoar, which I'll say it's possible to do that, but I'll get to that later. That can give you a more accurate wind reading. Of course, the wind reading is always going to be your current wind at that time. That can change as you go on final glide. When you're flying in mountains, especially, you have to think about that because if you go down a valley that has a great big
That's kind of funneling all the wind down it. That might change your final glide substantially, and XCSoar won't have that accounted for. But generally, in flatland flying, the thermal drift does work pretty well, and it should have that in there. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure that it's not 100% accurate.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
So yeah, I just showed how to move the glider in the simulator. We've seen that. Now that's the end of the basic session. We're gonna go into the advanced session
Hey,
next.
Chris.
Yeah, sorry, go question.
Yeah, it's Tyler. I thought I had it straight in my head, but I guess I didn't. The safety height, you said on task, it'll choose between the safety height or the finish height, but then when you were talking about landables, you said it adds. Like when you look at the number, it puts the two together, like your arrival height plus your safety height. Did I get that wrong?
Yeah, you're correct. I guess the like for let me just show it on the XCSoar. So I'll set Reed's Field here as a go-to. So anyways, yeah, it's going to show that I'm well above in this case. The reason that this one is different than your finish altitude with the task. Now, Reed's Field, you haven't set up an altitude there, so it's basically zero. It's navigating to zero. When you set up in the task the finish, you put a finish altitude in there above the ground, that's what changes things. And usually that's only going to be at the finish.
Okay,
So
so if I'm looking at XCSoar and I see Reed's Field at 58.43, I'm going to get to Reed's Field at 58.43, not.
No,
like,
you're going to get there at 68.43 above ground. But yes, I know this is kind of confusing, and that's I say it caught me out in a contest once because I didn't get that perfectly, but yeah, when I put the task back here, yeah, when we go back to Rockton, actually this might be a good way to illustrate it. What I'm going to do is navigate to Rockton. So we're navigating to finish right now. I'm not sure if it's going to work properly. So if we go straight to Rockton, it's going to say that we're going to get there at 6,200 feet. If I do a go to, or let me do that through alternates. It's saying 62 as well. Oh, that's because the safety height's the same. Yeah, I mean, in this case, it doesn't change that much. But I guess when it's calculating the final glide to the cylinder for the finish, you're going to be 6,000 feet above the finish, not 7,000 feet above the finish. But yeah, say if we're navigating to Reed's Field, we'll end up being that extra 1,000 feet above because the or how do I describe that? I guess yeah, because there's no finish altitude in there. It's basically showing you the ground. I don't know if that makes any more sense, and I wasn't successful illustrating it here, but
I'll keep chewing on it, and I might ask a follow-up question. Cool, thanks.
Sure, yeah. And yeah, sorry, I'm having a tough time explaining that well, but
yeah, no, it's something I've been wrestling with too.
Okay. Can we just pause quickly? I'm gonna run to the bathroom. Chris, I don't know if you can pause the recording, and then let's take like a 5-minute break, and then we'll get back into it if that's all right.
Yep, sounds good. I can just pause it real quick.
Okay, thanks. All right, we're back recording. We're gonna get into the advanced settings. Yeah, I'll dive into it. Basically, we're going to go through the whole entire system config setup and a few of the other parts, devices and such. this probably will have a bunch of questions along the way, and yeah, feel free to jump in with a question, and I'll try to answer the best I can. So, you're gonna enter your XCSoar menu by opening the menu, check mark or double click on the screen, config, and then system. And we're gonna start at site files here. We've already seen the site files. We've added a whole bunch of site files. Yeah, and check expert mode for this part of presentation. Yeah, there's a lot of these things. If you're not sure what they do, there's a little help button. This is watched waypoints. If you don't know what that means, you hit help, and it gives you a quick little explanation of what that is. So if you're going along wondering what something is, that's a good way to figure out. It doesn't have everything, but it has an explanation for some things. So yeah, we're just gonna go screen by screen here. So site files we've already gone over. So you can just use the arrows at the bottom of the screen here, click right, and it'll take you to the map orientation. I think these are kind of self-explanatory. I'll tell you what I like to do. Cruise orientation, I always like to use my track up. So that's gonna take into consideration if you're flying into any wind. And then when circling, it's kind of annoying having the screen turn around the whole time. So I recommend, it depends what you like, but either keeping it north up or target up. Target up takes you to the next, or will keep the next turn point at the top of the screen. So I like target up myself, but yeah, I recommend target up or north up. Circling zoom, this when you're thermaling, it will automatically zoom into, it basically gives you a different zoom level while you're turning. You can use that as you like. Glider position, that actually changes where the glider sits on the screen. So 20% I found is good. I usually don't change that, but you can modify it as you like. There's a max auto zoom distance and distinct page zoom. So that is as you basically swipe left and right on the screens, it'll save your zoom position based on what page you're on. So you can leave that on or off as you like. I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything here. Elements. I think a lot of this stuff is kind of self-explanatory. Ground track. Let me remember what auto is. Okay, yeah, it's gonna give you a track as opposed to a heading. If there's a lot of wind. So I think auto is probably a good mode for that. Fade traffic, I think that's new. I'm actually not sure what that is. Keep showing traffic for a while after it has disappeared. Yeah, that's a useful thing to have. But farm track is especially, the ranges aren't huge on it, so it's nice to have it gives you a little different if you have Flarm on your XCSoar, I think it's grayed out the farm traffic if it doesn't actually have a signal. I think there's another symbol on it. I can't remember what that is off my head, but trail length, I'll try full here. I don't know if you'll be able to see it in you can see somewhat the trail here. This little gray part, and it's pretty much a straight line, but that's your trail, and you can sometimes that's useful to have as a if you want to see where the last thermal was or something like that. It looks like that anyways. Oh, yeah, there's different trail types. Some will be colorized based on what the vario is showing, so that could be useful for finding lift lines or thermals again. Detour cost markers, and I can show you I'm going to put that on. And let's start the airplane moving. It's going to show it to me. Might have to reset everything. Well, here's an example in the presentation. So So yeah, you're going directly to the Acme Airport here. This is more like if you have a bunch of clouds to the side of your course line that you want to follow, you can kind of point your nose towards them, and these numbers are going to tell you the percentage, if you go to that point, of how much more that will increase your distance flown. So if you're just going a short way to this 3 and then straight to the airport, that'll be 3% extra. If you're going all the way out here to where the 44 is, that's always going to be a 44% increase on your distance. So it can help making your decisions on how far you want to deviate to a cloud. So displaying waypoints portion of it, there's all sorts of options there. Oops. You know, how many letters you want displayed. You can put full name, 3 letters, whatever. All sorts of different styles that I think are pretty self-explanatory. The one that is different here, and I think I have it. Yeah, landable symbols. There's a few different styles of
Hey,
landable
Chris?
symbols. Go ahead.
When you're looking at your XCSoar there, oh, maybe it was your other presentation page, but having the 2 up was blowing my mind a bit.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay, I'll try to cover it then. But anyways, yeah, there's different landables, black and white traffic lights are purple circle. I usually use a purple circle, that's the default, but you can see when you're out of glide range, it doesn't have a circle around it. In this, or sorry, yeah, for the purple circles, black and white, it just gives you color or a white thing. I use a black and white screen. I find having the circle around and the label good enough. With the grayscale, you can still kind of see it. Then there's traffic lights. The one thing that I believe Purple Circle now does give you the option of kind of a different color. I think it gives you a different color ring, but with the traffic lights, it gives you the amber color as a field that you you have final glide to, but it's around terrain. So the terrain might be blocking it. So it might be better that you don't know that you can make it, because you do have to make it over that terrain, but yeah, that's what the amber means anyways. Where I missed that screen. There we go. The terrain, Pavan was asking that before the meeting. There's all sorts of different terrain styles you can put in there. There's some defaults. You can really customize it to your own. I customized mine for my black and white screen a bit because I wanted the terrain to show up better on the black and white screen. So I have to be a little more careful with that. But if you're using a color screen, I don't know, you can just check with all the different defaults that it has and see what you like the most. Airspace, we've loaded the Canadian airspace file on. One of the things that's kind of annoying about the Canadian airspace file is that there's airways and class B airspace shown all over the place, and most of us aren't going up above 12,500 feet, so it doesn't really affect us. So if you're staying below 12.5, I recommend you can just do a clip altitude in your airspace, which gets rid of all the airways and things. If I have yeah, I'll show an example with XCSoar here. So at the moment we have airspace all on, and when we look around, we see all these airways that are kind of, useless to us if we're, especially in Ontario, you're pretty rare that you're getting above 12,500. So yeah, going to the config, airspace, and we're going to do clip altitude. Some reason I would think 12.5 should be the proper number that you put in there, but it doesn't work for some reason. So you put 12.4 and it'll clip 12.4 and above 12.5 altitudes. So hit that and we close, then we look, and all those airspaces that were kind of in the way are gone, which makes it much cleaner to look at. The important ones, Waterloo, Guelph, cutout and everything are there. Yeah, it makes it much easier to read the screen. That's a big one. You can change the colors of all the airspaces to whatever you like. You can make it match the VNC or whatever. So, oh yeah, I guess filter is one of the big thing. I guess the other way to do this, I'm gonna set this back to all on. So here's all the airways on. You can go into your config bin airspace. The other way you can get rid of all the airways, which I don't like this method quite as much, but it works, is to turn the Class B display off. So we just tap on Class B until everything's off. Now this is turning off the warnings as well. I would recommend that you leave warnings on at the very least if you're going to turn off the display. But this is a way to do it. And now when we look, it's gotten rid of all the Class B airspace that I say doesn't really affect us in normal everyday flying. Oops, there we go. Airspace. So you guess, yeah, you can also change all the colors in this box. So it's you can also the windows, you can change patterns. I think on Android you can set whether there's a border and how wide the border is and all that kind of stuff. Gives you options for warning time, etc. And anyways, it's all there. Safety factors. So this is what we were talking about earlier, arrival height and terrain heights. This is where you can edit those. I recommend that you set 1,000 feet. That gives a safe altitude that you can, when you get to a field, that gives you time to evaluate the field and do a proper circuit into the field. So yeah, I recommend you keep it 1,000 feet. You have another terrain height is similar. I guess we're talking a little bit about getting a final glide with a mountain in the between you. This gives you how high above that terrain you want to. If it won't give you it'll say that you can't make the final glide with a mountain in between. If you're doing a straight final glide. Now, yeah, you have to kind of say, do I want to? Let's say that I just can make it over top the mountain. Do I want my final glide to show 0 when I'm just squeaking over top the mountaintop, or do I want to have a bit of a terrain safety factor in there? That's where you set that anyway. So basically, it won't tell you can make it to your next waypoint or your I guess it's your finish, unless you can cross the terrain at whatever height you set there, 1,000 feet right now. Polar degradation, if you have an older glider with scrapes all over it, or even in it, I mean, there's probably no gliders that are perfectly matching their polar. So if you want to set a percentage of how much you want to degrade your polar, and this will be a global setting, so it'll work with any glider you set up, you can set it there. It's probably not a bad idea to put a few percentage in there, 3 to 5%. And if you have a really old glider with gel coat flaking off, maybe you want to push it up to 10%. But I don't really know what the exact setting should be, but yeah, you have to figure that out. Auto bugs, you can turn that on and that will assume that you're going to basically degrade your polar by a certain percentage as you fly along. I think, let me get to that. I think in the help, it tells you exactly how much. Yeah, it says 1% bugs each hour. If you get a lot of bugs and you're worried about that affecting your final glide, there you go. Safety McCready. Safety McCready is basically there's a few points where you're setting up a let's say emergency glide to an airport or something like that. Now you can set this up so instead of setting, if you had 4 knots on your McCready, it'll tell you what you can get to at a 1 knot McCready instead. I prefer to turn that off, and I'll show you where to turn that off later, because I'd rather, if I'm flying in a 4 McCready, probably because there's pretty strong thermals and there's probably gonna be really strong sink there, and the higher McCready setting is going to give you a better it's going to give you a steeper glide to your destination. So let's say if there's strong lift around, you probably should have a higher McCready set. Especially if you're kind of scrambling to an airport. Most likely that's going to be because there's not much lift around it and you're in a sinking area. So it's better to leave that McCready high. And the speed to fly risk factor, I don't know if I had, no, I don't have examples here. Speed to fly risk factor, I guess it'll tell us here. It basically, if you're using an auto McCready, it will decrease your McCready setting the lower you get, closer you are to ground. And it tells you in the help there exactly how that works. I personally don't use auto McCready, but yeah, so that basically will only affect auto McCready. Live computer. Now, I guess the big thing here, let me see if I have, no, I don't have another page. So auto McCready, to say if you use it, you can set up that setting there. Block speed to fly. I actually like to use the block speed to fly. If you have that on, the speed, you can have an info box set up in your XCSoar. It'll either give you, for block speed to fly, it'll just give you 1 speed based on your McCready setting. If you have that off, it'll vary your speed to fly based on what speed you're flying. Or sorry, what the, not what speed you're flying, what the air is doing. So if you're in sync, it'll tell you speed up. If you're in lift, it'll tell you slow down. I think most people say that you don't want to be chasing a speed to fly too much, because just moving your airspeed faster and slower causes drag. The acceleration that you're making when you change your airspeed causes a lot of drag. So it's better to kind of keep to 1 airspeed, especially if it's just a general long glide across a blue area. When you want to slow down as you're getting into lift, but if you're going over a larger area, it's better to keep 1 speed. Some of the other things I think are pretty straightforward. If you can set up XCSoar so it's connected to a switch that's connected to your flaps, and you can change your cruise climb setting based on what your flap setting is. The GR average period, that's for you can get your glide ratio instantaneous, I think they call it, or I can't remember exactly what the info box is, but you can change that period there, how long you want that calculated for. Wind drift, we talked a little bit about earlier. Yeah, I guess you can turn that off. The predict wind drift here, this is more on circling. So if you're under glide, underneath final glide, and let's say you're on your last leg, below final glide by 500 feet. What this predict wind drift will do is it will calculate, it's whether you want to calculate the wind into your thermaling. So if you have a really low McCready set, let's say 1 knot, and the winds are very strong, it's going to calculate, that when you stop to thermal, it's going to calculate that you're climbing at 1 knot with the wind pushing you really, really fast backwards. So that will show final glide required is very high. So if your McCready is set too low, you can find that your altitude required can be way off compared to what it really should be. And most people do set their McCready lower than than what you're actually going to be getting in thermals. So I do recommend turning that off unless you really know what you're doing with that. If you're setting very accurate McCready settings, then that can work. But if you're not setting accurate McCready settings, it'll show you that you need to climb a lot more than you need to, especially in a headwind. In a tailwind, it might tell you, well, actually, tailwind it probably works reasonably well, but in headwinds, it doesn't work terribly well. As long as if your McCready is lower than what you're actually getting. Wave Assistant, I haven't played with that much. It's a relatively new setting. I always turn it on, but I haven't really seen it, and I have flown a bit of Wave with it. I can't even remember what it does exactly. Oops. No, it doesn't have a help, but I think it gives you it kind of gives you a bar of where they think the wave is, but yeah, I haven't experimented with that too much. So these other options are basically how long are you going to be circling before it automatically switches to thermal mode, and then how long are you going to be cruising before it changes to cruise mode. You can set those. I would just leave those at the defaults unless you have a reason to change them. Computer wind. This is just how it calculates the wind, circling wind, zigzag wind and external wind. Or yeah, zigzag I think will work based on if you have GPS, but let's make the wind vector during glides. Okay, yeah, it does require an airspeed sensor, so you need to be hooked up to an external computer. So basically, XCSoar is only going to be calculating on circling wind if you just are using a phone not hooked up to anything. If you're hooked up to a Vario, it can calculate the wind, and you can leave that on. And then external wind is you use, if I'm hooked up to my glider, I have an S100 Vario, which has a wind and a pretty good wind vector on it. I can use the wind from that, so I'd leave that on. If you have it on and you're not hooked up to a Vario, it's going to use whatever it has. So you can leave those on if you want, but I guess the only reason you'd be moving this if you don't like using the zigzag wind, or you find it's not accurate, or the external wind's not accurate, or whatever, you can come in and change these. So route. So previously we talked about doing a final glide with a mountain in front of us. If you just have like a singular mountain that you can go around, XCSoar can actually calculate your route around a mountain and then to your turn point, instead of just saying that you can't make it. And there's different options here. And also, yeah, it can calculate airspace. I'm not sure how well the airspace works. I haven't really experimented with that much, but it can take into account terrain and airspace. I usually just leave it terrain because I'm really not sure how the airspace works. Route climb, I can't remember how that works exactly, but route planning allows climbs between the aircraft location and destination. Okay. Yeah, I think that's route ceiling would work with airspace. I mean, a good example is coming back into QNIM. We have an 8,000-foot ceiling over top the airport, which is about 4,300 feet above ground. This can keep in mind of how much ceiling you actually have, or is that more to do with the climb? Or I guess that's nothing to do with the airspace. That has to do with giving a ceiling. To be honest, I think I leave that off all the time. I don't believe I do use that. But yeah, here's the reach mode. It's straight glide. So if you have a mountain in between you and it's possible to go around it. If you have it on straight, it'll only calculate whether you can make it past that over top of that mountain. You can put on to turning, and it'll calculate whether you can get, do your final glide to your turn point, going around the mountain. Reach polar. So yeah, this is Oh, sorry, reach is the that's a glide amoeba. This is not actually to do with the this is not to do with a final glide, but this has to do with your glide amoeba that goes around you, which yeah. And this is I say we have safety McCready, or you can set it to tasks. I'm gonna set it to task. And then you reach display as terrain line. We can also set it to a shade. I think I need to reset if I set that, but so this is a line that we're talking about here. I say we were quite high in this example. And actually it showed you the one McCready, the safety McCready line at first, which is much bigger, and then it switched to the 3-knot McCready reach line. So that's the line that shows you how far you can go based on terrain and wind and things. Back here, route. So yeah, you can say you can change that to shading, lines, and whatever you want. So scoring, this is I'll show you can set up an info box and I'll show you what it looks like. I'm gonna just switch this one to contest distance, I believe it is. Contest distance, yeah. That'll tell you how far you've flown based on whatever contest that you have set up, which is where we set up here. I usually leave it at OLC plus, because that's kind of what I'm thinking about if I want to know what my score is going to be. There's all sorts of different options there. If you're more into WeGlide, it's there. But yeah, that's all your options. Predict contest. If you're flying a task and you still have, let's say, 50 kilometers to go to home, you can put predict contest on, and the number on your contest distance it'll give you is your distance back to the airfield. If you don't have that, if you have it off, it'll give you distance to the point where you are currently. So if you're 50 kilometers away, let's say you're doing a 300-kilometer flight and you have 50 kilometers back to the airport. If you have this on, it'll show you the 300 kilometers. If you have it off, it'll show you 250 kilometers in the calculations. FAI triangle areas, I'll see if we can actually show that. And let me see if it shows up on here. Might have to reset it to get it. Yeah, it's not showing up on there. I don't know if I have an example of it. Basically, the FAI triangles will show you, it gives you like a big yellow arc showing you where you need to fly to close a triangle or make your triangle bigger. Or so yeah, not close the triangle, make your triangle bigger. It's a shame it's not showing it right now. Let me see if changing the direction is going to show it to me. Yeah, I'm gonna have to reset it to make that work properly. But it basically gives you, yeah, it gives you a big circle or it's kind of a funnel looking thing that you can go towards to make your triangle bigger. And there's two different modes to get an FAI triangle. Your smallest leg needs to be 28% of the distance of the whole task. It changed to 25% for 750-kilometer flights and above for FAI tasks. For OLC, if you're it uses 25% at 500 kilometers. So that's why there's a difference here with 500-kilometer or 750-kilometer thresholds. So basically it'll change your funnel shape if it's set to either. I think most of the time people are flying OLC, so it's better to leave it on the OLC one. But if you're going for a free record, then you might want to have it on the 750-kilometer one. Gauges, yeah, I guess we're gonna get into the thermal assistant here. XCSoar has a thermal assistant, and I'll show you. That's what it can look like. That's a separate page of the thermal assistant. You can also have XCSoar come up with a little box while you're flying that comes up on the main screen that gives you the thermal assistant. Basically, where these where the lines are longer, closer to the outside, your thermal is stronger. So it gives you kind of a 2D view of the thermal from above and where the strongest parts are. So where it's, this one you've gotten this really strong part, and then it dies off as you come in through, 270 degrees from where you are there. Something that you gotta kind of practice using, because it is a little bit odd. This screen also has where you can turn the final glide McCready 0 off. You can also turn the final glide bar off, but I think you don't want to have that on most of the time. Thermal band, I don't know if I have a good picture of that. No. Thermal band here. Let me see if it shows on here. Probably not, because I didn't thermal. Basically, I think it's usually above the final glide bar, or it's on the right side, but it's a little bar that shows you how strong the thermals are at its different heights. Usually, the higher you are, the stronger the thermal is, but it'll give you a little graph. If you're finding that, trying to find if there's I guess on a blue day, you might want to know how high you should be climbing. You'll see where the stronger part is, but I'm not sure how much practical use that actually has, but it is available. Yeah, I think we already mentioned the final glide 0 thing. I recommend turning that off. Going on a 0 McCready final glide is a bad idea most of the time. That would mean that I think there are situations where that might be useful if right at the end of the day when all the thermals have died, and there's basically no wind, you might want to set it to 0 to see if you can squeak into an airport, but still want to give yourself some margin there, because I recommend, you might want to set it to 1, but 0 just seems too low. That's going to give your theoretical best glide to the airport, which is not really that useful, because in theory, it never works. I shouldn't say never works, but it often does not work. Anyways, that's that page. So you can, if you don't have a Vario for some reason in your glider, or you want to have a second Vario, you can actually set up a little Vario within XCSoar. If you're not hooked up to a Vario or some sort of a different information box for that gets you pneumatic and all that, the Vario is going to be very sensitive and not total energy compensated. So it's not the greatest. I had one time when I was flying a borrowed glider with it only had electronic Varios and the battery died. So I was without a Vario at all, and I pulled out I already had my XCSoar pulled out, and I put the Vario on that because it gave me something. But that's the only case that I think I'd be using the Vario in that way. Most of the time, we're going to have a Vario in the panel. That's going to be way better. So task defaults. This is useful for flying a contest, especially. Well, actually, I guess I don't need to show that page. For a finish height, especially, when you go to a contest, that's going to be most likely that's going to be the same height every single day. So instead of putting that in every time that you make a new task, you can set up a finish height there. And every time that you open up, create a new task, that'll be the default setting in there. So yeah, especially when I go to contest, I set these things up. If it's going to be a consistent thing. Start height does change every day, so it's not, or it depends on the contest. So a lot of the places that you go to, the start height will change depending on the day, but the finish height pretty much never changes. And yeah, max speed, I guess, most contests or a lot of contests these days do have max speeds that you have to set. So You can set that up for the whole contest, and it usually doesn't change for the whole contest. Task defaults turn point types. This is another thing, yeah, especially for flying a contest. They'll have specified turn point cylinders and things like that. And instead of editing your finish and start cylinder every single day, setting something, you can set a default. So when you make a new task, those defaults will be in there. One of the important things, because right at the bottom here, it has optimization margin. When you're flying an AAT task, as I think we saw earlier, as I changed the McCready, your distance in the task can change, or sorry, was it the time to fly, or the let me just try this again.
Hey, Chris,
Yes,
just
Tyler?
going back one slide. I got a question.
Sure.
If
The
your
task
start max
defaults?
height, if your start max height is 0, would it ever start a task?
I think at 0, it basically gives you infinity. So I think 0 is fine. I'm pretty sure that's the case.
Okay.
Yeah. I
Okay,
think if
fair
you had one in there, or like 100 feet, then yeah, maybe you wouldn't start a task.
Then it would enforce it, but 0 just ignores it. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, and if you did that by accident, you could always manually push to the next turn point. But yeah, your calculations, XCSoar might not calculate an AAT time correctly or something like that if you don't have that set up properly. Anyways, yeah, I'll try to explain this one for the AAT optimization. Yeah, if it's a 3-hour AAT, the optimizations of where the targets are in your AATs, XCSoar will move those to try to get you finishing the task at exactly 3 hours if you have this set to 0. Oops, go back here. If you have the optimization set to 0, it'll take you exactly 3 hours. This basically gives you extra, this adds you 5 minutes as a kind of a buffer. If you set 3 hours exactly, it's probably more likely that you're gonna, if you get a really good thermal on final glide, or as you get final glide, you're gonna be under your time. So it just basically adds on a little extra buffer, which is a good idea. 5 minutes might even be too low. Probably 10 minutes is good in a lot of cases. In an AAT, it's best to be as close to the 3 hours as you can, but being under time by a little bit is bad. It's basically a penalty. But being overtime is not a penalty. So if you're gonna go one way or the other, it's better to be overtime. I think a lot of the stuff is pretty straightforward. If you want to increase text size, here's where to do it. Screen layout. So yeah, this is really how this screen layout one is how you can really customize XCSoar to look different to your preferences. I'm gonna show the different ways we can do this. I don't know if I have examples here. Yeah, I guess here's one of the things we can do, inverse info boxes, especially with colored screens. It can be better, and with a lot of the phones have OLED screens, which show blacks really well. So if you have a OLED, I think it's probably better for you to do the inverse info box. It'll probably save a tiny bit of power because the pixels aren't being energized to make a white color, and just the text. And it's also can be easier to read in sunlight, high sunlight cases. Can't remember if I had examples of this. I'm gonna bring up the other options here. Screen layout. So at the moment I have 8 split. There's all sorts of different options for where the info box is. Basically the info box, how many info boxes you want to have. If you like to have as much information on the screen as you want, you can put 24 info boxes on, and it'll probably cover half the screen here. Or I guess it doesn't cover half the screen, it makes them really small. And then you can add info boxes to your heart's desire along here. I prefer to keep it very simple. I like 8, and 4 of them are basically the same the whole time. And I'll show you my setup in a moment here. I have it in the next couple slides coming up. But yes, all sorts of different options here. I actually prefer bottom or top or whatever. Get them all next to each other. And what else do we have? Yeah, we have Flarm display. You can have that come up automatically. I actually find that distracting myself. Sometimes I'll turn it on, sometimes I'll just turn it off so the Flarm is not coming up. If you have a lot of traffic, sometimes it can be more distracting than not, but sometimes it's nice if especially if you're trying to leech a thermal off somebody and they're just ahead, you can have the Flarm display pop up and it'll show you how strong the thermal is, and do I want to go join them or do I want to stay with the thermal I'm in right now? It can be useful in that case. The rest of the stuff is more just how things look. Colored info boxes can be useful. I don't know if it'll show in the example here. Yeah, I guess here's an example. The height's at 0 feet. So if you're really low AGL, it'll give you red. I think it just goes black otherwise, or white if you're in the invert verse. Yeah, there's a few other examples of that, but AGL is probably the best one. So I think it's better to turn that on, with the exception with I have my e-ink screen, so I actually turn that off. So then you can't. It makes it harder to read if it's going red. It's basically a grayscale of red. And yeah, this is another part where you can really customize this XCSoar as much as you want. The default usually just the map with info boxes and just a map, so the full screen map screen. You can add as many things as you want. That's another one, map with info boxes. I can do, I usually make an AAT set of info boxes in aux1 here, so I can have an AAT screen where I have the AAT info boxes, and I would basically, yeah, have a map in the AAT, and I can do that. Or there's a cross section, which say I'm not sure how useful that is, but it's kind of neat looking, at the very least. So now I have my regular map screen that we've been looking at the whole time, full map screen with no info boxes. Now this is my auxiliary 1. You can also change the name to that. I changed the name to AAT task, but you can change the name of that to whatever you want. And then this is the cross section. So this, I say I've never really used this in flight or at any point, but I could see it being useful if you have really complex airspace, but also I think it might just clutter things up too much. But it kind of gives you a side view of airspace, and it can also give you a side view of a turn point cylinder or something like that as well, and terrain. I say the terrain's at the bottom there. But yeah, you might want to have that as a page kind of further back that you may not only use on slight occasion, but I don't know, it's there if you want it. So yeah, there are all sorts of options you can make. You can make as many pages as you want. So I usually just make a few. Do I have? Yeah, here. These are kind of my, or yeah, I'll go back here. This is the pages, and then there's info box sets as well. Cruise info box circling, final glide, and then you can make your own auxiliary 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I usually make a AAT one. You could also make, like a contest one and a OLC one or something like that, or whatever you want. But anyways, they're all there. Changing info boxes, I already kind of showed how to do it, but this sets it up. When you're on sim mode, it's hard to get into, well, you can't really get into circling mode. So if you want to change the info boxes that it's showing while you're circling or thermaling, you can do it here. Final glide mode, I actually usually leave that off if you feel that you need different info boxes on the final glide. That's how you can do it. And that basically they're auto info boxes, which is in the previous page on the pages page. Info boxes, if you have set that to auto, as soon as you hit final glide, as in you're above final glide, it will switch to that info box set in the bottom, where usually it changes between cruise and thermaling mode. And then you also have the option of having the final glide mode. So I don't really like that because I don't want any more info or different info when I'm on final glide. I find the stuff that I have up there is all I want, but those are the options. So I set up, this is what I usually use for myself. There's certainly no right or wrong of what you like to have in there. I keep it very simple, I think, compared to some people anyways. I like to have finish distance, which is the distance around the whole task. I have waypoint next, I believe it is, and that gives you like a bearing to set to go to the airport, or sort of to the waypoint that you're going towards. It also gives you what the airport or waypoint is that you're going to. That can be useful, make sure that the glide computer has actually sequenced to the next waypoint. You can double check there. It gives you a radio frequency as well, which could be useful. Next box is actually have altitude. I think it's auto or altitude both or something like that. Because I usually hook up to my Vario, which gives me barometric altitude. So I have it to baro altitude if it's getting that, but if it's not getting baro altitude, then it will read GPS altitude. And that's either from the phone or from the flight computer, either or. Basically, it'll get the best source. Height EGL is great to know how high you're above when you're in if it's not a flat plane that you're flying over, it'll tell you it'll give you a good idea of what you are AGL over the field. Remember, if you're using GPS isn't as good as pressure altitudes. It's accurate in ways, but it often is off from your barometric altitude. It's best to go by your barometric if you can. But remember, sometimes GPS often shows that you're higher than you actually are. When you're low down, it's usually not much. Maybe it's only 50 feet, but it could be 200-300 feet. It could be more. So be very careful when you're using GPS altitude there of your AGL height. The AGL, it takes the map data that you added when you add the map and calculates your AGL based on that. That's also not, it's pretty good, and I haven't really seen any bad situations on that, but just be ready that could be wrong. So I always have the McCready down here so I can set it as I need it. So you can manually tap on that and change it. I actually when I have it connected to my Vario, I can change the McCready on the Vario and it changes it on here automatically. And that's usually how I change it in my glider. But if I'm, flying another glider, then I'll just change it manually there. Wind is probably not even really needed because it gives you a wind arrow on the map screen. But I have that there mostly because I don't really have anything else to put there. Contest distance, and this is kind of I might have contest distance if I'm flying OLC trying to do a big flight. If I'm flying a racing task, I might just change that to my speed achieved during the task or average speed. Sometimes I find I don't want to know my speed because if it's low, I get depressed and then I change my tactics, which isn't a good idea. I think it's always best to fly as fast as you can. Time local is, I think, self-explanatory, but anyways, the difference is when I'm in circling mode, I still have the McCready there, but I have my my current thermal, the actual altitude gained, my thermal current average, which is the average, and this is what I really like about XCSoar, is it gives you the average right from when you started circling to where you are at that point, and then a 30-second average. So the average of the whole thermal is good to know, just how strong the thermals really are. Sometimes, you'll see your needle hit 10 knots or whatever on the day, and you'll think, oh, it's a 10-knot thermal day. But if you're only getting, part of the thermal is getting 10 knots, and the rest of the thermal is getting 6 knots, you're probably going to average closer to like 6.5, 7. So that gives you a good idea what the thermals actually are, which can kind of give you a better idea what you should be setting your McCready to. Yeah, thermal current 30 seconds, I think is pretty self-explanatory. It's the AAT page that I was talking about. Basically, yeah, the 4 top ones are the same, but the bottom 4, I usually have my distance min and distance max, and that actually does, as you progress on the task, it'll tell you what the highest distance you can achieve on it and what the lowest distance you can achieve on it. There's different info boxes that can give you the highest speed you can achieve and all that kind of stuff. I like distance. That's just how my brain works. But if speed works better, then use speed. AAT time is the time left in the AAT. And then finish estimated time, I think it's actually task time to go is what the info box is called. Yeah, actually, that says it there, task time to go. It tells you how long it'll take you to return back to the airfield or your finish line based on your McCready setting, and yeah, how much you have to go in the task. XCSoar will change your target to get you set up perfectly for an AAT. So let's say it's 3 hours, it'll try to set you for 3 hours, and then plus that optimization margin that we talked about earlier. So 3 hours and 5 minutes. This will give you, I like to have these 2 boxes right next to each other because it gives me a good comparison. Am I going to be overtime? Am I going to be undertime? Now that's only going to be as good as what your McCready's set to. If your McCready's really, really low, it's going to show that it's going to take a long time to get back. And if you hit good thermals, you're going to beat that easily. Now, if you set your McCready super high, then yeah, it'll show that you're probably going to get back, or yeah, you'll probably come back late if you have it super high. If you have it at 12 knots, let's say, just for demonstration purposes, and you're only getting 3 or 4 knot thermals, you're probably going to come back way over time because you're not going to be able to achieve that type of climb during the task. But yeah, anyways, that's a good way to check, if you're going to be on time, under time, overtime. And I recommend setting your McCready high for this purpose, because the higher McCready is going to be the more conservative to make sure that you're over time. If you set a low McCready, it's more likely that you're going to beat that McCready setting and become under time. I hope that makes sense. And yeah, presentation is in the chat. When we get it on YouTube, I'll try to get the link up to presentation on YouTube as well, so you can go through the presentation and look at these info boxes if you want to get some advice on how to set up your info boxes. So the XCSoar has an internal logger. This is how you can set up your logger. You can put your pilot name in there, which will show up in the IGT file info. I would set both these time step cruise and circling to set it to 1 second. It's basically how often you're going to get a recording mark in your IGT file. Used to be a problem when storage was expensive, that getting an IGT file on your logger, you had to be careful how often you're taking these. But storage is so cheap these days, we usually have tons of storage, that it's really not a problem. So I recommend setting these down to as low a setting you can, which is 1. The one thing that I do want to point out on this one is logger ID. Your IGT file that comes from XCSoar is going to look kind of generic. The way the IGT files are set up is that The first number is the year, the second number is the month, the third number is or number or letter is the day of the month. And then it gives your logger, the type of logger it is, which, it'll say XCSoar. And then there'll be three numbers in that, in the file name, or three letters, that basically make it a individual, or yeah, so logger serial number type of thing it's giving. The default XCSoar will give AAA in the file name. And if you're trying to find your own logger file and you have a whole bunch of different logger files for that day, and everyone has AAA in there, it's really hard to find your own. So it's better to put in a logger ID. It's easier to find yours. If you're flying in a contest and using XCSoar as your logger, and you're handing in your logger file from XCSoar, most of the scoring programs, use that logger ID to differentiate, to put that file to your name in the program. So having a unique logger ID there, it's got to be 3 letters. It can be no more than 3 letters. Make it so these programs can figure out that it's you in there. So I recommend putting something in there, whether it's your initials or your contest, your registration, your contest ID, whatever you want. But it's good to put something in there to make your IGC file unique. See, there's a bunch in the chat here. Let's see if the link's presentation is right at the top of the chat. So go look at right at the top of the chat. Okay. Yeah, there's a note here that
Sorry, Chris,
the
it's not at the top of the chat. I've scrolled, other people have scrolled. I don't think it's there anymore.
okay, let me just copy it then. Paste it again. Okay, I just reposted it. Right, units we went through earlier. Australian is a good starter preset, and then pressure, inches of mercury is probably one thing you want to change. You might want to change some other things in there. If you're flying in the US, especially flying a contest in the US, I recommend just changing your distance units to miles. Trying to convert to kilometers to miles, I think you could catch yourself with a rounding error where you might not make a turn cylinder or something like that. Reza, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes. Is there any way we can have a dual units in a one info box?
You mean you want like
Let's say
meters
we have
and feet?
nautical mile and kilometers on top of each other.
Not that I know of. I know some of the like barrel altitude will show meters below it, but I don't know if you can get both in distance. Yeah, not that I know of.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there's tracking settings. You can set up skylines tracking, live track 24. I think there's even more ones in XCSoar these days. Let me get that out here. What do we have? Okay, so it's the same ones. So that's pretty much all of the settings for XCSoar. I guess the last page, there's some new ones. XCSoar Cloud. That will, if you're connected to a cellular connection while you're flying, it'll actually send out thermals to the cloud, and then everyone can share it on their XCSoar. You can pick up, but that does require a cell phone connection. Yeah, you can say whether you want to display the thermals or not. And then, of course, that's better if everyone's using it. I usually don't have a cell phone connection on mine, so I don't really use that. There's a weather, so you can actually get weather set up in XCSoar, but it's only was it PC Met or I can't remember what that's called, but they don't have great North American options, or I think actually America's good, but Canada's not great, so I haven't really used that myself. I guess there is a way to put SkySight into XCSoar, but you have to use a different style of XCSoar. And I've tried it and I found that it really doesn't look that great. I think it's better to just use a separate, or either change on your cell phone to the SkySight app. The SkySight app or the web app works quite well for that. So, and it can actually show where your glider is. So I'd recommend just using that instead of trying to get into XCSoar. You can connect WeGlide, which will automatically upload a flight. You can also do tasks, which I was going to show an example of it. I only just discovered this one. It's kind of new to me, but I thought it's kind of neat. There we go. So I can go to my profile, task, hit a new task. Let's say we'll do Rockton to, I could probably set in Cambridge there, or the Puslynch to Rockton again. I guess I didn't set that up quite properly, but let's get rid of that one. Let's just do this again. Rockton to Puslynch and return. And I could save that. And I'll bring up XCSoar again. I'll go to Nav, Task Manager, Manage. You can go to My WeGlide Tasks, and that shows up. And then you can click on it, it'll load it. Now you got Rockton, Puslynch, Rockton. Kind of a neat little thing. I don't know how useful that is, but relatively new thing to XCSoar. So that's all the settings XCSoar. One thing we haven't done yet is set up an airplane. So yeah, I'm gonna do this along with us here. Let's set up a I'm gonna set up a QNIM plane because that's or I'll set up my own plane. How about that? We're gonna go to menu, config, and then plane. At the moment I don't have any planes in here. I'm gonna put new. Registration, I'm gonna put Golf Hotel Victor Bravo. That's my glider. Comp ID is 99. Type, I can type in here, it's a Venice B. And then the most important thing is the polar. So you want to tap on polar. And you can type in all the polar coordinates if you want, if you don't know, don't have it. But the easiest thing to do is just hit list. It'll give you a huge list of all different gliders. Try to find your glider in there. I'll put Venice B 15 meter. And okay. And it also throws a handicap in there. That's usually based on I don't know, that might not be what you want as a handicap. You can change that, but that's a few things you can change in here. You can put the WeGlide type in here. It basically you can put a name in there that'll more correctly match when you upload your flight to WeGlide. But anyways, decide to put your polar in. I say it's pretty simple. You can do a list. You can also, if your glider's not in there, you can try to find a light glider and use that, or you can manually change these polar numbers. So we have that activate, yeah. Make sure that's activated when you start up XCSoar. If you're changing airplanes, you want to make sure that you have the right airplane active. Adding plane, selecting a polar. Yeah, make sure you're active. Next is setting up devices. So there's different ways to hook up to a Vario or whatever you're connected to, a FLARM device, something like that. Bluetooth is, I used to use a yo-yo board. A yo-yo board is basically a wired connection. It has to go through a conversion box that goes to your phone. So it goes from your Vario to the yo-yo box to your device. I was using that. I found a little bit of turbulence would usually disconnect the USB connection somewhere, and it's hard to find good USB connections. And then I would lose my connection to the yo-yo board, and I had to manually go into XCSoar and reset it. And it, it happened a few times. Well, sometimes more in a flight if it's really bumpy. So I got fed up with that, and I changed to Bluetooth. Bluetooth, don't have to worry about things getting knocked around and disconnecting. So that's my preference at the moment. The nice thing about the yo-yo board was that it did charge your phone as well. Bluetooth, you'd have to have a different solution for charging. So you can have just a charging thing on your dash, or connect to a battery or whatever it is. Or I mean, with my e-ink phone, it probably would last a pretty long flight anyways, but you can hope that your battery lasts a whole flight. But you usually want to have some sort of a charging option in your glider. Yeah, and it connected to Flarm, so you can get little targets like on the screen here. This one's showing the contest ID and the climb rate, the plus 3.5 knots or meters a second. I don't know what that is, but it's if you're flying along and you want to see what the glider head is doing, you can get that. That only works if their Flarm is set to normal mode. If it's in what is it, stealth mode, you won't be able to get that. But yeah, if they're not, most people don't put it in stealth mode, but I know some big contest pilots like to put it in stealth mode to hide their climb rates. So yeah, to config, now this is going to be variable based on what kind of devices you're connecting to, but the default is a built-in GPS and sensors. GPS is the main one. It might have a baro sensor. It might have magnetic compass or something like that on the phone, but it can, if XCSoar can pick them up, it'll display there. Basically, well, this is where to do it. I'm not going to get deep into how you connect devices. You'll have to read into that if you do that. But if you have a specific question, probably better do that offline, but you can contact me. One of the other parts of the config menu is flight. This one you might, if you're flying with water ballast, this is where you can enter how much ballast you have in there. You can either put it in as there's options to put it in as liters or wing loading, or you can change to pounds, whatever. But and that's in units. You can change that one. But it's also to options of how to enter your ballast. Bugs, this is on a per flight basis. You can increase the bugs. When you open XCSoar again, it'll reset to 0. If you want a permanent polar degradation, you do that in the settings menu under polar degradation. You can set up the altimeter setting there, QNH, and I'm not actually sure what max temp does, but it's there. Now, if wind is if you're using thermal drift and it's not working very well, you can manually put the wind in there, put the speed in the direction. You can also change quickly whether what wind options you're connected to, whether you want external on or off. But that's a quick setting for that. I have a quick checklist here. So it's probably better to look over your presentation and go over these items. But before you jump in the glider and fly, it's best to kind of check over your airplane. Do you have the correct airplane set in there, correct polar? Have you put water ballast in? Is it set into the computer? Make sure that your site files are correct, the map set up properly, turn point and airspace files, especially if you have like no airspace close to you when you take off. You want to make sure that your airspace is on. You have the proper file in when you do get close to airspace. Tasks programmed in, waypoint sectors, your start finish height and finish height are correctly set. You want to make sure that your arrival and terrain height are properly set. and devices are connected, especially with when I connect to my Vario, which actually connects to my Flarm as well, so I get the Flarm and the Vario connections from there. I always have a quick check, make sure that it is connected, and it'll show on there whether it's getting Flarm, whether it's getting barrel altitude, and all the other stuff that's included on there, airspeed and such. If you're just using the internal GPS, you don't really need to check that, but you should be able to tell whether it's moving or not. But yeah, connected devices, you want to check that. That is the end of the advanced section. And that's pretty much the end of the presentation. I'm going to get a little bit into, yeah, I guess, yeah, we have Condor. A good way to practice Condor is to connect to, or sorry, a good way to practice XCSoar is to connect it to Condor. And you can practice using XCSoar while you're flying Condor, especially with connecting via Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. That will help. You can actually, when you get to start thermaling, you can actually see what thermaling mode looks like. You can decide what kind of info boxes you like in each of those cases. I put some links. Let's say go to the presentation and check those links, and you can look on how there's quick, I think it's YouTube videos and forum topics on connecting to Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. It takes a special program to connect to Condor, but it's not super difficult, and you can use the actual device that you're using in the glider with Condor, which is a really great way to learn how to use it. You can also, for VR users, they're usually using Condor on Windows, and then connecting that to the virtual reality, so it's in your virtual reality vision, which it can be complicated to set up. I set it up myself just earlier this couple months ago, and I pulled my hair out a few times, but I eventually got it working. In presentation here, there's a whole bunch of links to different websites and things for XCSoar. But yeah, I'll open up to questions now. So if you guys have questions, please go ahead. I can't imagine I covered everything, so yeah, please go ahead.
Chris,
Yeah.
question, WeGlide, you use that for task planning?
No, I have not done that yet. I just kind of discovered that within the last couple of days when I was actually just going over the presentation, but it's an option. I usually use CU myself, but yeah, I don't know. It looks like a neat easy way to do it.
Okay.
And WeGuy actually has a function where you can fly an assigned task where you get extra points for it, and you can do it through that. So could be a good way to do that if you're into that, but I don't know, just wanted to show that was an option.
So Chris, in that case, are you then soaring to your cup file and then uploading the cup file from CU?
Are you talking about assigned task on WeGlide?
Yeah, anything that you're planning on, anything that you're planning on CU, how are you getting it into XCSoar? Just still pretty manually through the cup file?
Yeah, I take the cup file and I just add it to XCSoar manually. Yeah. And I have all the tasks. So you can access all those tasks, and with a cup file, say it won't come up on the main screen. You have to hit that more in the bottom right corner of the task manager dialog, and then it'll come up. It'll say, your cup file name.cup, and then it'll give all the tasks in a big list.
Are you using like a Bluetooth or a Wi-Fi download of your flight at the end of the day? Is it to OLC Plus? Is that, I think, what you configured?
So I don't use the XCSoar file. So the XCSoar file is not as secure. I usually use the XCSoar file for either from the Flarm or from my S100 Vari, which has a IGC logger on it. The way I do that is actually I have a USB stick that has it's got USB-C on one side and a USB-A on the other. So I plug the USB-A into the FLARM, download the file, I pull that out, and then I connect that it's got the USB side to my phone, and then I upload it through there. That's how I usually do uploading.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. I'd say having that USB-A to C flash stick is really useful.
Where'd you get that?
Probably Amazon, I'm guessing.
Okay.
I was reading some of the chat stuff. Yeah, okay. I guess one of the fellows said that they find it really useful when they're replaying flights on Condor. They can have XCSoar out and muck around with settings while they're replaying a flight. You don't have to actually be actively flying, which is a good point. It's a good way to test out your XCSoar setup. I say it's very customizable, so there's lots of things you can change. And yeah, Rob's saying that they have Bluetooth in most of the gliders, or most of the more cross-country type gliders.
Chris, can you sorry, go back to that conversation? I didn't follow that conversation. It was about, is this about trying to create your tasks and load them into the FLARM, or you were talking about your USB-C? I didn't quite understand this.
Or this is how I download my flights on it. Like when I don't usually use the XCSoar file. Like it does upload to the OLC, but it gives you a blue check mark instead of a green check mark, or vice versa. I can't
Oh,
remember.
I
Something
noticed
like
that. Right. The IGC file that comes out of XCSoar, it always has a weird check mark. Oh, okay.
Yeah, because it's not an official FAI logger. Now, for the most part, it probably really doesn't matter. And unless I think the people who are like going to win the world OLC contest, I think you are supposed to have, or I think it's the speed league, you need to have a certified logger. I'm not even sure if it's a need, but there are some things that the OLC wants a certified logger for, but for the most part, it doesn't really matter. I say if you're not, I don't know, it's just I always save all my files anyways, so I'm doing it anyway, so I pull it off and um, throw it on my phone and upload it right away that way. But if you're not anal like me about that, then just upload from XCSoar. It works just as well.
Okay, thanks.
All right, any more questions? I'll say this presentation is in the chat. I encourage you to if you're going through trying to figure out how to use it, you can just follow along with this. I think it'll work well that way. I certainly didn't hit every single point on XCSoar today, but I think I hit most of them. But yeah, if you have any other questions, you're more than welcome. At the end of the presentation is my email. Send me an email, and I'd be happy to try to answer your questions. I don't know everything, but I know XCSoar pretty well.
Just a quick question. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No idea.
Quick question about the recording is, are you okay with us sharing the recording only with the stack people that come to the Hangar Talks, or publicly on YouTube for any rando on YouTube to watch?
I'd be happy with it going for any rando on YouTube.
All right, everybody say hi to the randos.
Hello.
Hey, Chris, it's Kelvin. One last one for you.
Sure.
I got a Lenovo 7-inch tablet specifically to use with XCSoar.
Okay.
Which is loaded up, ready to go, got all the files in it. When I start it up, it comes up and then crashes. It may wait until it gets a GPS signal or not, but it typically just crashes. Ever heard of that type of experience anywhere, or any ways to fix things?
I mean, probably the best thing is just to try reinstalling everything, make sure that everything's up to date, make sure that is it Android tablet, I take it?
It is.
Yeah. Maybe try updating Android. Do you know what version of Android it is?
It's been updated recently. I tried that. Yeah.
Yeah. If it's a
So-
really old Android version, it might you might be able to, if you go to the XCSoar website, you can find some older versions of XCSoar. Try those older versions of XCSoar, see if they work better. But it really would be just, guessing on that.
Yeah. It seems
for
like
the
I have
best
the
thing.
current version of Android and the current version of XCSoar, and it just
Yeah. Guys, I have a Lenovo as well, and it's been doing the same thing since the last set of updates on those two pieces of software. My workaround until I buy a tablet more stable is I downloaded XCSoar from their website, and I have it in my downloads folder. Whenever I run into this problem, the quickest solution, as silly as it sounds, is to uninstall XCSoar but keep the data, and then reinstall it, reboot the tablet. It's the fastest way, and it works perfectly for the next flight. Otherwise, it'll still crash during the next flight if you don't do that.
I'll try that, Pavan. Thanks.
Sorry, it's tedious, but I guess I don't know what happened in the last updates, but the Lenovo tablets are annoying.
Someone wrote in the chat here, or Nick Meyer did, you need to click the stop button and reset memory for Lenovo tablet. I find it easier to push stop and then clear memory. I'm not sure exactly what that is, but I don't know if that's of any help.
Okay.
Chris, I'd like to share a little tip about your checklist.
Yes.
One thing that I do, just before my flight, I check the safety, blah, 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 all those things. And then I look at the final glide bar. My safety height is set to 1,000 feet. So then it should show my final glide as minus 1,000 when I'm sitting on the field. And then I know my final glide is working properly.
Yeah. Yeah, because good point. That's something that I usually do as well. But that's also, it depends how you have the thing set up. If you have a remote start, then it might show something slightly different. But yeah, if you have the start set for the field, then it should give you something like that.
Oh, right. I don't usually fly tasks, so shoot, I just forgot there was something else useful.
Well, yeah, it's a good way to check that things are set up the way that you want it. And of course, it's not going to be exactly 1,000 feet. Usually, your altimeter setting is going to be slightly off, but it should be pretty close, within a 20, 30 feet, something like that.
I've set my polar degradation based on a little bit of testing that I've done, and some other guy in my club, and I've set polar degradation to 20%. I found that 15% is pretty close to real life. So anyways, for what it's worth, I mean, the testing's not exhaustive, but I don't know.
Yeah, I find I have a friend who I'll leave nameless, who has an older glider, and was telling me that XCSoar never gets a glide right. He puts 10% in there. But I think, especially now, if you're used to flying in Condor or something like that, where it always works perfectly, don't expect that in real life flying. And if you put a huge degradation in there, you might be compensating a little bit too much. Final glides are, it's impossible to get an accurate number on that in real life flying, because it's almost never that you have the perfect classic conditions of a thermal and then some perfectly set up thermal and then sink and then thermal sink, and then all to the same what am I saying, in proper proportions to each other.
Right.
Usually you're going to run into a sink line, or you're going to run into a lift line on final glide, and especially on final glide, that last little bit getting to the airport, further back on course, you're going to be taking the best looking part of the sky. You're going to take the clouds, and you're going to be in lift a lot longer. But when you get, especially the last like 10, 20 kilometers to the field, you don't really have much choice of changing to a different cloud bank. Like if there's sync between you and the field, that's all that's your only choice. You can't aim for those clouds. So it's more likely that you're going to run into sync streets hitting the airport than on course. And that's why I think a lot of people see that their final glides aren't working out quite as well right at the end, because you're kind of forced to go through the crappy air. You're also lower, so you can't judge yourself. You can't get yourself under clouds quite as well. You can't find that rising air. So yeah, the last little bit of a final glide is usually going to be the toughest. You're going to find the most sink there because you can't really choose your route. Now sometimes you'll get lucky and you'll hit a lift street the whole way, but I think most of the times you're going to find. So that's why you always want to have a good margin on your final glide, and that is why a lot of times the final glides don't work out perfectly like you wanted. If you've used Condor a lot, it always works out perfectly, but that's just not reality in real life. And I think when you start, if you can get yourself into lift lines a lot better, you'll find you'll be well above your final glide most of the time. Usually, when I'm doing a final glide, I'll often start below the final glide and just see if I can bump some thermals, and I'll often get above it. And I think when you have that mentality, then you'll find that it works out differently. But if you get within 20 kilometers of the field and all you see is blue, there's no clouds to bump or anything like that, you're most likely going to be going through a whole bunch of sink. So you should expect that your final glide will lose.
Yeah, for what it's worth, when I did those polar degradation tests, it was like early morning was still there. So, anyways, for what it's worth, that's what I'm using and another guy's using, but 15-20%.
Yeah.
But who knows?
I don't know. Yeah,
Who knows for sure?
I use, like, I say between 3 and 5, I think, on my glider, because they're old and obviously it's not perfectly the factory. But I think 15 sounds way too high to me. And I think I say usually my glides work out how I expect them to. But that's based on, you can't expect that it's always going to bring you back exactly at the height that it told you 30 kilometers before. That happens in Condor, but it doesn't happen in real life.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Chris, any thoughts on XCSoar versus CU Navigator?
I guess I got CU Navigator because I have CU, and I've kind of played with that a little bit. I haven't looked that far into it. I have some friends who've looked into it, and they say the setup is way easier versus XCSoar. So yeah, I mean, it's doing essentially the same thing, just slightly different way. I think if you find if there's things about it you like, I mean, it probably works for you. Of course, it costs money, and XCSoar doesn't. So that's a big jump for XCSoar, but I get it for free, but I still have decided to stick with XCSoar just because I know it so well. I've been using it so long. It's easier for me to stick with XCSoar. But I don't know, I say they basically give the same information in the end. It just plays it slightly different and has, from what I've heard, it's a little bit easier to set up initially.
So it's David from Toronto Soaring. I took CU. I used it a bit last summer. That Navigator, just because the ability to create tasks and then download them into your the cloud. But I actually had all my waypoints disappear on me on a very rainy sort of low vis day and in a strange place, and I was very alarmed by losing my waypoints in my way home. So I immediately switched back to XCSoar in the middle of a contest, and I don't think I'm looking back because I've asked them what happened. It happened to me a couple times. So because I was meddling around with it, and all of a sudden I couldn't upload any waypoints at all. I couldn't retrieve anything.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I guess to defend CU, I think CU at least does have some human people that you can contact for the support, where XCSoar doesn't really have that because it's all open source. But yeah, I mean, Navigator's a new program. It probably still has some still some things that it's working out. I know when I first looked at it, it didn't have a lot of features, but now I think it's pretty close to XCSoar. So yeah, I mean, if you've paid for CU and you get it for free, then it's probably worth trying. But I think it's like $100 a year or something like that. So you have to decide whether you want to spend that kind of money. Alrighty, well, sounds like the questions are drying up. I'll give another few seconds if someone wants to ask a question, but otherwise we'll say good night.
Thank you very much, Chris.
No problem.
Thanks, Chris.
My pleasure.